Hey, Jesse, let's have a devotion. We're going to look at John 19:23 through 24, as well as Psalm 22 and Matthew 27:46, which is also Mark 15, verse 34. Here is the biblical text. When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, a part for each soldier. They also took the tunic, which was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. Okay, this, by the way, is believed that it, could have been somehow connected to the Shroud of Turin, but it's not really the case. The Shroud of Turin was a burial shroud. This is a tunic that Jesus wore. This is a valuable piece. So they said to one another, "Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it, to see who gets it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled that says, "They divided my clothes among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing." This is what the soldiers did. So, according to John's gospel, the division of Jesus' clothes was also prophesied in scripture. Look at where it's prophesied. It's prophesied in the Psalms. Yeah, but Jesse, I thought that the Psalms were songs. Like, you've even said that, right? My team and I at Lifeway even released an album of worship songs drawn from the Psalms for that reason, because we were studying the Psalms and we wanted to give churches music to sing the Psalms. In that one series, it's like the worship pastor is using the scripture probably more in accordance with its original intent than the pastor is while he's preaching it, because they're intended to be sung. So why does John argue that it was a prophecy that's fulfilled? It's because the Psalms are prophetic. The book of Hebrews argues this soundly. And so this is Psalm 22:18. I wanted to show you Psalm 22. And if you're familiar with scripture, you'll recognize even more than just verse 18. Right off the bat, even if you're a fan of, what's that band, System of a Down? Right off the bat, you're going to recognize some lyrics. My God, why have you abandoned me? Some translations render that word forsaken me. Why are you so far from my deliverance and my words of groaning? Right? You know this right away, don't you? I mean, this is also in Matthew and Mark's gospel accounts. Here it is. Jesus says the words of Psalm 22 while he's on the cross. About 3 p.m. Okay, do you remember in yesterday's devotion, we saw how all this, the whole thing with Judas and the 30 pieces of silver, or was that day before his devotion, begins at daybreak, and now we're at 3 p.m. Look how long this has gone on. About 3 p.m, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Ilahi, Ilahi, lema sabachthani." That is, my God, why have you abandoned me? I believe that Jesus says those words so that prophecy would be fulfilled. He is speaking the words, Psalm 22, right before he's going to die on the cross. Now, I know that the original plan was to go through Mark's gospel at the end of this year, but because of a couple of series, we've had to interject, trying to make space for our building campaign. I wanted to just kind of show you this. Look here, this is Matthew 27, verse 46. Here's Mark 15:34. And at 3, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Ilahi, Ilahi, lema sabachthani, which is translated, my God, why have you abandoned me? And so you can see just some slight differences in the articulation, both making the same statement. 99% of the Gospel of Mark is included in the Gospel of Matthew. And so if you were with us a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when we did Matthew, you've already gone through Mark, so give me time. I promise we're going to get to there. But I want to go back to Psalm 22 because there's even more. There's even more of Psalm 22 that is so clearly, obviously, patently, undeniably prophecy about Jesus on the cross. My God, I cry by day, but you do not answer. By night, yet I have no rest. I wonder how many people have read Psalm 22 and in a time of despair and depression and felt like, yes, this was written for me. This was written about me. And had kind of a narcissistic hermeneutic of Psalm 22. I get it. I know what it's like to read Psalms and feel like this perfectly articulates what's in my heart right now. But let's use nothing but a Christocentric hermeneutic It's about Jesus. It was about Jesus. It will forever and always be about Jesus. And that's actually better therapy for you, because whatever it is that brought this depression upon you, okay, be it spiritual oppression, a chemical imbalance resulting from the fall, or perhaps even just reeling from the consequences of your own sin, Jesus on the cross is the ultimate answer. It's not about you crying out to God. It's about Jesus crying out to the Father on the cross. But you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Our ancestors trusted in you. They trusted, and you rescued them. They cried to you and were set free. They trusted in you and were not disgraced. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by people. Jesus is despised. This I'm a worm, not a man thing, this was a motive in a lot of the Puritan writers. So read some like Baxter and Edwards. Yes, I'm aware of the fact that Jonathan Edwards owned slaves. That sucks. But read some of the content, okay? Especially if what he wrote about Scripture, if he's dealing with Scripture appropriately, then the personal flaws of the man become irrelevant. That was a theme in Puritan preaching. I'm a worm and not a man. Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and shake their heads. He relies on the Lord. Let him save him. See, this is even kind of echoed in the mockery of Jesus on the cross. Let the Lord rescue him, since he takes pleasure in him. It was you who brought me out of the womb, making me secure at my mother's breast. I was given over to you at birth. You have been my God from my mother's womb. All right, this is about Jesus, isn't it? Don't be far from me, because distress is near and there's no one to help. Many bulls surround me. Strong ones of Bashan encircle me. They open their mouths against me. Lions mauling and roaring. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are disjointed. My heart is like wax melting within me. My strength is dried up like baked clay. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You put me into the dust of death. For dogs have surrounded me. A gang of evildoers has closed in on me. They pierced my hands and my feet. Man, can you imagine the weight that you feel in your heart if you get, federally indicted, and it's like the United States versus you, like the most powerful country in the world versus you by name? This crucifixion, this was a Roman thing. This was the most powerful country in the world versus Jesus. He is surrounded by dogs. Crucifixion, by the way, wouldn't be invented or even specified or further developed by the Romans for another 300 years after this was written. And yet it describes the piercing of hands and feet. I can count all my bones. Jesus was given the ultimate punishment. When we studied 1 Corinthians, we see this motif over and over again. Don't muzzle the ox while he's treading out the grain. And it's applied in 1 Corinthians to see to it that pastors aren't destitute. They're full-time for the church. They're not bivocational, and that's so that they can give their full time, but they're poor. And you're degrading your brother. Don't degrade your brother. Paul even says, is it for oxen that God is concerned? And it's because that teaching first appears in Deuteronomy on the heels of a limit to the number of times a man could be whipped. And the whipping with the cat of nine tails was mitigated so that the dignity of the man receiving the corporal punishment would be preserved. But the cat of nine tails would take flesh with it. And it's like Jesus's ribs are being exposed by the tearing away of his flesh so that you could count his bones. All my bones are disjointed. Look at this. I can count all my bones. People look and stare at me. They divided my garments among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing. There it is, verse 18. If there's any doubt, if you think that I'm playing games with conjecture from Psalm 22, which is centuries older than the Gospel of John, here it is in the Gospel of John. This happened so that the scripture might be fulfilled. It says, they divided my clothes among themselves. They cast lots for my clothing. This is what the soldiers did. It's so clear. John 19:24 proclaims a fulfillment of Psalm 22, verse 18. But you, Lord, don't be far away. My strength, come quickly to help me. Rescue my life from the sword, my only life from the power of these dogs. Save me from the lion's mouth, from the horns of the wild oxen. You answered me. Right now, this is a beautiful prophecy that begins to speak to the hope of the coming resurrection of Jesus. Okay, it does not apply in that Jesus would indeed give his life, but his life would conquer death. Death would be unable to hold him. See the book of Acts. Right there in the Gospel of John, we have a proclamation that the psalm was fulfilled. And that's not the only example of Psalm 22. This is another really powerful example of taking people through prophecy, showing them like Psalm 22 or say Isaiah 52 and 53. Show them these Old Testament passages, because if they listen to System of a Down, they're going to know verse 1 of Psalm 22 right away. And you can show how that's an ancient thing that foreshadowed Christ by centuries. Show them the piercing of the hands and feet that predates crucifixion by centuries, predates the Roman Empire by centuries. And yet it so clearly, undeniably, absolutely prophesies Jesus on the cross. So this is another tactic you can use in sharing your faith. You can read an Old Testament passage and you can ask them, what's that about? And it's clearly about Jesus. In Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ, he did this. He showed this guy who went door to door at his office and asked them to read Psalm 52 and 53. Asked him, what is this about and where is it from? Where is it from? And they said, well, this is clearly about Jesus, so it must be in the New Testament. And then they were shocked to learn, no, it's in the Old Testament. So this is an evangelistic tool. Try it. All right. This could also be helpful too, like to speaking with Orthodox Jews, but not just those who deny that Jesus is the Messiah. Skeptics as well. Show them. Read Psalm 22, for example, and then have at the ready the Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of John, because Psalm 22 was more about Jesus on the cross than it was about anything else. Show this beautiful prophecy fulfillment aspect of Scripture that takes them straight to the cross of Christ. If you're looking for kind of a reading assignment, do this. It's a very simple reading assignment. Look, I'll read anything you give me. Here's what I want to give you to read. Read Psalm 22. Read Isaiah 52. Read Isaiah 53. Like whatever the Lord lays on your heart. And then let them see for themselves. This is an Old Testament passage written centuries before the birth of Christ, but it's so patently, obviously, clearly, prophetically about Jesus. That is apologetics and evangelism in one.